My name is Renata O.C., and I was 34 years old the afternoon I found out my brother had been wearing my identity like a second skin for almost 6 years. I wasn't looking for it, I wasn't suspicious. I was sitting in a beige office chair across from a loan officer named Philip Khaki Shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, waiting to hear whether I qualified for a mortgage on a small craftsman house in Decatur, Georgia. A house with a porch. A house I had saved for, quietly and carefully, the way I did everything. And Philip was taking too long. He kept clicking his mouse, tilting his head, clicking again. When he finally looked up at me, he didn't look like a man delivering news. He looked like a man deciding how to say something he didn't want to say. Ms. Say, he said carefully, before we go further, can you tell me about the vehicle accounts? I didn't know what he meant. I told him that. I told him that. I drove a 2019 Honda Accord paid off, nothing special. He turned his monitor toward me then, slowly, like he was giving me time to prepare. On the screen was my credit report. And listed under open accounts were three auto loans, a BMW 7 Series, a Range Rover, and a Mercedes AMG. All opened in my name, all with balances still outstanding, all totaling just under $280,000 in debt I had never agreed to, never signed for, never even seen before that moment. My hands went very still in my lap. The air in that office went strange and thin. I remember a plant in the corner, one of those tall, artificial ones with the waxy leaves, and I stared at it because it was the only thing in the room that wasn't spinning. That's not me, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Philip nodded slowly, carefully, like a man who had done this before. He pulled out a printed page and slid it across the desk. There was an address on the loan applications, not my address, but an address I recognized instantly. A house in Marietta with a blue front door. A house I had visited dozens of times. A house I had eaten Sunday dinner in, argued in, laughed in, cried in. The address belonged to my twin brother, Marcus. I sat in my car in that parking lot for 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard like it was the only real thing left in the world. The Georgia heat pressed against the windows. Someone pulled in next to me, went inside, came back out with a coffee, drove away. The whole world was moving normally, and I was sitting completely still, holding my phone, looking at Marcus's name in my contacts. His picture, us at our mother's 62nd birthday, both of us laughing at something our uncle said, his arm around my shoulders. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did, like he'd been waiting to hear from me. Nay, he said, using the nickname only he used, the one our grandmother gave me when we were small. His voice was warm, easy, completely ordinary. What's good? And I almost said nothing. I almost said, hey, just checking in. Because that's what you do when someone is your twin brother, when you've known their voice longer than you've known anything else on this earth, when the sound of them saying your name makes something in your chest go soft and familiar, even when everything else is wrong. You almost pretend. You almost let them off the hook before you've even asked the question. But I didn't. I looked at that address on Philip's papers still folded in my passenger seat, and I said, Marcus, why did your address show up on three car loans in my name? There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But I know my brother. I have known him for 34 years. I knew the texture of that silence the way you know the difference between a house settling and something actually breaking. What are you talking about? He said. Still easy, still warm. And that's when I understood that the hardest part wasn't going to be discovering what he'd done. The hardest part was going to be accepting that he'd done it, and then deciding what to do next with steady hands and a clear head in a way that protected me without destroying both of us. I wasn't there yet, but I was beginning. What I didn't know, sitting in a parking lot with the sun going down over a Decatur strip mall, was that the three cars were only the beginning. That when I started pulling the thread, carefully, the way you pull at something you're afraid to unravel, I would find 6 years of decisions my brother had made using my name, my credit, my carefully built financial life, while I worked double shifts as a hospital administrator and clipped coupons and told myself the house with the porch would come if I was patient enough. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that Marcus was still talking, filling the silence with something plausible and smooth, and that I had stopped listening. I was already thinking. To understand how Marcus got access to everything, you have to understand what it meant to be us. To be twins raised by a woman who treated twinhood like a religion. Our mother, Cecilia Osei, came to Atlanta from Accra in 1987 with two suitcases and a cousin's phone number written on a folded piece of paper. She built her life here the hard way, cleaning offices at night, taking classes during the day, eventually becoming a licensed practical nurse who worked the same hospital floor for 21 years. She was not a soft woman. She was a precise woman, a disciplined woman, a woman who ironed her scrubs the night before and kept her bills in accordion folder labeled by month. But when it came to Marcus and me, she had one blind spot, and it was total. She believed that twins shared a soul, not metaphorically. She genuinely, structurally believed that what was mine was Marcus's and what was Marcus's was mine, and that any attempt to separate those two things was a kind of violence against nature. When we were children, this looked like matching everything: clothes, school supplies, birthday cakes divided exactly down the middle. When we were teenagers, it looked like her refusing to take sides in any argument between us, no matter what. And when we were adults, it looked like her calling me, quietly, whenever Marcus was struggling, and reminding me that I was the strong one, that I had always been the strong one, that I had always been the strong one, and that strong people carry more because they can. I was the strong one. That was the family story about me, and I had been living inside it so long I'd stopped noticing the weight. Marcus was 4 minutes younger, and everyone treated it like 4 years. He was charming in a way I never was, loud at parties, easy with strangers, the kind of man who remembers a bartender's name and makes them feel like the most important person in the room. He sold commercial real estate, and he was good at it in bursts. When the market was moving, Marcus moved with it, and those years he had money and confidence and an ease about him that I genuinely admired. He was my brother. I loved watching him succeed. But the market doesn't always move. And Marcus, I would come to understand, had never actually learned to be still. The first time I helped him, I was 26. He'd had a slow quarter, missed two rent payments on his apartment in Buckhead, and called me on a Tuesday night with that particular quietness in his voice that meant he was embarrassed. I transferred him one fee $400 without hesitating. He paid me back in 6 weeks. That felt like the end of the story. The second time, I was 28. His car had been repossessed, something about a payment arrangement that fell apart, and he needed help making a deposit on a lease. I co signed. He made every payment for 14 months, and then the account went quiet. And by the time I noticed, the remaining balance had gone to collections under both our names. I handled it. I told myself it was a one time thing. There were other moments I filed away without examining. The time he asked me to confirm some personal details for what he described as a joint account we supposedly discussed: our account numbers, my social security number, my mother's maiden name. I was at work, distracted, and I gave them to him over the phone like handing someone a pen. The time he borrowed my car for a weekend and returned it with paperwork in the glove box I didn't recognize and didn't read. The afternoon he sat at my kitchen table while I was cooking and asked me conversationally how my credit score was sitting these days, and I told him 791, and he nodded like I told him the weather. I remembered all of these moments in the days after the parking lot. They came back to me one at a time, like objects rising to the surface of water, and each one landed with a new weight. None of them had felt like warning signs in the moment. They felt like brother things, family things, the ordinary texture of being close to someone. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal by someone you love. It doesn't announce itself. It hides inside normalcy. It borrows the language of trust and uses it until the account is empty. My best friend Dominique, who I've known since we were 14, who is the kind of person who answers the phone at midnight and doesn't ask questions until you're ready, came over the Thursday after the loan appointment. She sat at my kitchen counter while I made tea. I didn't drink, and I told her everything. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long do you think it's been going on?" I told her I didn't know. She asked me when I had last actually pulled my full credit report. I hadn't. Not a real one, not a detailed one. I checked my score through an app occasionally. It had been hovering in the low 700s for the past 2 years, and I'd assumed the dip was from the old collections account Marcus and I had shared. I hadn't looked further because I hadn't thought to look further. Dominique set her mug down. "Pull it now," she said. "All three bureaus, tonight." I did, and what I found was not three cars. It was 3 cars, 2 credit cards, a personal loan from a lender I'd never heard of based in Delaware, and a utility account opened at Marcus's Marietta address. All in my name, all opened within the past 6 years, all either in default or quietly accumulating balances I'd never seen. The total liability was just over $340,000. I sat on my bathroom floor for a long time that night, not crying. I was past crying by then, just very still, very cold, running the numbers in my head. 34 years old, $340,000. 6 years. A brother who knew my voice and my grandmother's nickname for me, and exactly how much I trusted him. The confrontation, when it came, was not that night. I was not ready. I needed to be ready because I understood with a clarity that felt like something hardening in my chest that if I walked into that conversation angry and unprepared, I would lose. Marcus was a salesman. He had been selling me a version of himself our entire lives. If I came at him with emotion, he would meet me with explanation, and explanation would soften into excuse, and excuse would soften into the same warmth that had always made me forgive him before I'd fully decided to. I needed something he couldn't talk his way around. I needed paper. And so I started gathering it. I gave myself 2 weeks before I said another word to Marcus. During those 2 weeks, I showed up to everything normally. I answered his texts. He sent a few casual ones, a meme about something our uncle had posted on Facebook, a question about whether I was coming to our mother's for Sunday dinner. I said yes to Sunday dinner. I sat across the table from him and passed the jollof rice and watched him laugh at his own jokes and refill my mother's water glass without being asked. And I smiled when it was time to smile, and I felt something in me that I did not yet have a name for. It was not anger. Anger is hot, and this was cold. This was the feeling of watching someone very carefully for the first time after a long time of not watching at all. He looked the same. That was the thing that kept catching me. He looked exactly the same easy posture, same quick smile, same way of tilting his head when our mother told a story he'd heard 100 times, like it was still worth hearing. And maybe that should have made it easier to doubt myself, to wonder if I'd misread the credit report, if there was some explanation I hadn't thought of. But it didn't, because I had the paper now. I had folder, growing thicker every day, and paper doesn't have a twin brother's smile. In the first week, I requested my full credit reports from all 3 bureaus directly, not through an app, but in writing, the official way, because I needed documentation that I had discovered this and when. A woman named Carla at the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft helpline walked me through the process with a patience and a thoroughness I will never forget. She explained what a fraud alert was, how to place one, how to begin the process of disputing accounts that weren't mine. She also told me something quietly, almost at the end of the call, that I wrote down word for word, document everything before you confront anyone, because once they know you know, things have a way of disappearing. I documented everything. In the second week, I found a consumer protection attorney named Gloria Tran, whose office was in a brick building off Peachtree Road, fourth floor, plants on every windowsill. She was small, precise, and had the kind of stillness about her that told you she had heard worse and handled it. I brought my folder. She went through it page by page without expression, occasionally making a note, occasionally asking a question in a quiet, flat voice that gave nothing away. When she finished, she set the folder on her desk and looked at me directly. This is identity theft, she said, legally, clearly, documentably. It doesn't matter that it's family. I told her I understood that. She asked me what outcome I was looking for. It was the right question. I had spent 2 weeks gathering evidence and almost no time asking myself what I actually wanted at the end of it. I thought about it sitting there in her office with the sound of Peachtree Road coming up faintly through the window. I didn't want Marcus in prison. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. He was my brother and my mother's son, and I had loved him my entire life, and whatever he had done, I was not sitting in that office trying to end him. But I wanted my name back. I wanted my credit restored. I wanted the $340,000 of fraudulent debt removed from my financial life. And I wanted Marcus to be the one who fixed it. Not me, not my savings, not my savings. Gloria nodded. She said we could work with that. She advised me to file a formal identity theft report with the FTC and a police report with the Decatur Police Department before the confrontation. both for my protection and because those documents would give me standing. She also told me to send Marcus a certified letter before we met in person, formally notifying him of the disputed accounts and requesting documentation of any authorization he claimed to have. Give him the chance to respond in writing, she said, because he won't, and his silence will be its own kind of evidence. She was right. The certified letter was delivered on a Wednesday. I watched the tracking update on my phone, delivered 11:42 a.m., signed by Amos. He did not respond. Not that day, not the next. He texted me on Friday about a basketball game, like a man with nothing on his conscience at all. The confrontation happened on a Saturday, not at his house, not at my mother's. I chose a neutral place, a conference room in Gloria's office building that she let me use for 2 hours on a weekend as a courtesy. I told Marcus I needed to talk to him about something financial and asked him to meet me. I gave him the address. He showed up 8 minutes late in a pale blue shirt, looking relaxed, carrying a coffee like a man arriving for a casual meeting. He stopped when he saw Gloria sitting at the table. "Who is this?" he said. "My attorney," I said. "Sit down, Marcus." He sat, and then I placed the folder on the table and I slid it across to him and I watched his face. I had been watching his face my whole life. I knew every expression it made, and I watched the moment he understood what he was looking at. It was small, that moment. A tightening around his eyes, a stillness in his jaw. He covered it quickly, the way he always covered things, with a kind of casual puzzlement, picking up the first page and tilting his head like he was seeing something mildly confusing. "Nay," he said, and the warmth in his voice was so practiced, so perfect, that even then it made something ache in me. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Don't," I said. Just that. One word. And something in my voice, the coldness of it, the steadiness, the absence of anything he could push against, made him stop. Gloria placed her copy of the FTC report on the table, then the police report, then the certified letter delivery confirmation with his signature on it. Marcus looked at the table. He looked at me. And for just a moment, a single unguarded moment, the salesman's face fell away entirely. What was underneath? It was not the brother I grew up with. It was a man who had been caught, who knew he had been caught, and who was now calculating his next move with the same quiet speed he'd used to make the first one. "I was going to pay it back," he said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What replaced it was something smaller and flatter. And honestly, that voice was easier to sit across from. "I know you believe that," I said. "Renata, Gloria is going to explain what happens next," I said. "I need you to listen." And I folded my hands on the table and I let her talk, and I did not look away from my brother's face, and I did not cry, and I did not apologize for any of it. Not once. The days after that Saturday had a particular quality to them that I still find difficult to describe. It wasn't relief, not yet. Relief implies that something is over, and nothing was over. It was more like the feeling of having set down a weight you'd been carrying so long you'd forgotten you were carrying it, and now your arms were shaking not from the effort of holding it, but from the sudden absence of it. I had been managing two realities for 2 weeks: the surface one, where I passed the jollof rice and answered the memes, and the one underneath, where I was building a case against my twin brother. And now those two realities had collapsed into one, and the one that remained was harder and cleaner and required something from me. I had never quite had to locate before. It required me to stop protecting Marcus from consequences. That sounds simple. It was not simple. I want to be honest about that because I think there is a version of the story where I become someone righteous and certain, someone who saw clearly and moved swiftly and never wavered. That is not who I was. I was someone who sat in her car outside Gloria Tran's office building after the confrontation and called Dominique and said almost in a whisper, "What if this destroys him?" And Dominique, who loved me and told me the truth even when it was uncomfortable, said, "Renata, he made this choice. You are just the one who decided to stop absorbing it." I held on to those words for a long time. Gloria had been clear with Marcus in that conference room. He had three options. First, he could voluntarily contact every lender whose account he had opened in my name, confess to the fraud, and cooperate fully with the removal process, which would take time but would keep my name clean and potentially reduce his own legal exposure. Second, he could do nothing, in which case Gloria would proceed with a civil suit that would attach to any assets he held, including his real estate license. Third, he could attempt to dispute the documentation we had, in which case we would allow the criminal identity theft charge to move forward without intervention. Marcus had asked for 2 days to think. Gloria had given him 48 hours. While we waited, I worked. Not on the case Gloria was handling that, but on myself, on my actual financial life, on the project of understanding the full scope of what 6 years of quiet damage looked like in numbers. I made appointments with each of the three credit bureau's fraud departments. I filed the formal disputes on every account, attaching the FTC report and police report as supporting documentation. The process was slow and bureaucratic and required me to repeat the same information to different people in different departments with the same patience each time, and I did it. I built a spreadsheet, I am my mother's daughter after all, that tracked every disputed account, the date of the dispute, the bureau, the expected resolution window, and the balance being contested. $340,000 lived different broken into rows. It still looked like a catastrophe, but a categorized catastrophe, and there's something about categorizing a catastrophe that makes it feel survivable. On the second day, Marcus called me. Not Gloria, me. He called at 7:14 in the morning, early enough that I knew he hadn't slept. I let it ring twice and then I answered, because I had decided I would not hide from this. I'll do the first option, he said. No greeting, no preamble. His voice was rough and flattened in a way I'd never heard from him. I know, I said. Gloria will send you the contact list for each lender today. A pause. Then, are you going to tell Mama? And there it was. That was the real question, the one underneath all the legal maneuvering. Not what happened to his license or his assets, but what happened to our mother's idea of us. Because Cecilia Osei believed we shared a soul, and what Marcus had done was reach into the shared space between us and take everything that was mine and spend it quietly over 6 years, while I worked double shifts and saved carefully and dreamed about a porch in Decatur. I don't know yet, I said. That was the truth. He didn't say anything. I heard him breathing. Marcus, I said, why? I need to understand why. Another silence. And then, in the flattest voice I had ever heard from him, because I knew you'd fix it. I stayed very still with that. I let it sit in me the way you let something hot sit on your tongue before you decide what to do with it. Because there was something in those 6 words that was more honest than anything he had said to me in years. Possibly, ever. He hadn't done it out of hatred. He hadn't done it out of hatred. He hadn't done it because he thought I wouldn't find out. He had done it because somewhere in the story our family had built about us, the strong one, the capable one, the one who carries more because she can, he had found a door that was always unlocked and he had walked through it again and again for 6 years because he believed, correctly, that I would handle whatever came next. He wasn't wrong. I had always handled it. The co-signed car, the transferred money, the collections account. I had handled every consequence of Marcus's choices my entire adult life. The difference was that this time I was choosing not to. The contact list will come from Gloria's office this afternoon, I said. You need to begin making calls today. Renata, today, Marcus. I ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The morning light came in through the window above the sink, that particular Atlanta morning light that's golden for about 20 minutes before the heat takes over, and I watched it move across the countertop, and I thought about what he'd said, because I knew you'd fix it. I thought about all the years I had spent being the kind of person who fixed things, and how that quality, which I had always considered a strength, had been quietly functioning as an open invitation. There is a kind of love that looks like strength, but is actually a form of disappearing. You fix so much, so reliably, that the people around you stop seeing the cost. They stop asking if you're all right. They stop offering. They simply bring you their broken things and trust that you will put them back together, and they are grateful for a while, and then the gratitude becomes assumption, and assumption becomes expectation. And somewhere in there, you have stopped being a person and become a function. I had been a function in my brother's life for a very long time. Marcus began making calls that Thursday. Gloria's paralegal, a meticulous young woman named Sasha, tracked every contact pension number, every letter of acknowledgement from each lender. The BMW dealership's fraud department was the most straightforward. They had seen this before, moved quickly, and removed the account from my credit within 3 weeks. The Range Rover lender was slower and required a second round of documentation. The Mercedes account had been sold to a collections agency in Phoenix, which required Gloria to send a formal cease and desist before they would engage with the dispute process at all. It was not fast. It was not clean. It was a long, document heavy, phone call heavy, deeply unsexy process of reclaiming my own name, one account at a time. But it was moving, and every confirmation email I filed into my growing folder felt like something being returned to me that I hadn't realized I was allowed to want back. 6 weeks after the confrontation, Gloria called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "The last disputed account has been removed," she said. "Your credit report is clean." I was in the hospital parking lot about to start my shift. I sat in my car and looked at the concrete column in front of me for a long moment. "All of them?" I said. "All of them," she said. "Your score should begin reflecting the corrections within the next 30 days. Based on your underlying history, you're looking at a return to somewhere between 780 and 800. I thanked her. I sat there another minute. Then I went inside and worked my shift because that's what I did, because that's who I was. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a choice rather than a sentence. The confrontation with my mother was still coming, and so was the conversation about what happened next with Marcus. But the name was clean. The number was mine again, and I was ready. 6 months after I sat across from Philip, the loan officer, and watched him turn his monitor toward me, I closed on a house. Not the original one. That listing had sold while I was in the middle of everything, gone to a young couple who probably walked through it on a Saturday and said yes before the weekend was over. The way you do when you don't have 6 years of someone else's debt attached to your name. But there was another one, 3 streets over, also in Decatur, also with a porch. Smaller porch. Better light in the kitchen. A magnolia tree in the backyard that was older than me by several decades and dropped its flowers onto the grass in wide, slow circles every spring. My realtor, a steady woman named Brenda, who had talked me through the process with the patience of someone who had seen every version of a complicated story, handed me the keys on a Thursday morning and shook my hand and said, "You worked hard for this." I stood on that porch for a long time before I went inside. The justice, when it came, did not look the way I had imagined it would when I was sitting on my bathroom floor with a credit report and a cold feeling in my chest. It did not arrive in one clean, dramatic moment. It arrived in increments, in paperwork, in phone calls, in the slow restoration of something I had not even understood was mine, until it was taken. That is how real justice tends to work. Not a single crash, but a long, steady reckoning. Marcus cooperated with every lender. That had been the agreement, and he kept it methodically and without complaint in the way that people sometimes become very cooperative once the alternative has been made clear to them. He did not lose his real estate license. Gloria had structured the agreement carefully enough that his voluntary cooperation created a record that distinguished the situation from a criminal prosecution, though she was precise with me about the fact that this was a courtesy, not a right. He was, legally, a man who had committed identity theft against his own sister. The fact that he faced civil consequences rather than criminal ones was the direct result of a choice I made, not a reflection of what he deserved. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. I chose not to pursue criminal charges. I made that choice with clear eyes and a full understanding of what I was choosing, and I do not regret it, but I also do not dress it up as forgiveness. It was a practical decision. It was the decision that got my name clean fastest, that gave me the most control over the outcome, that caused the least collateral damage to my mother. It was not mercy in the spiritual sense, it was strategy in the legal sense. There is a difference, and honesty requires me to name it. My mother found out. I had gone back and forth about whether to tell her for weeks, sitting with it the way you sit with something that has no good answer, only less bad ones. In the end, she found out the way things tend to find out in families, imperfectly, partially, through a conversation that wasn't supposed to go the direction it went. Marcus had told her a version, a carefully edited version, soft around the edges, heavy on his own remorse and light on the specific numbers. And she called me on a Sunday evening, her voice careful in the way it got when she was holding something she wasn't sure how to put down. I told her the full version, all of it, the credit report, the $340,000, the 6 years, the certified letter, Gloria Tran, the lenders, all of it. I told her sitting at my kitchen table in the apartment I was about to leave, in the neighborhood I was about to leave, with moving boxes beginning to accumulate in the corners. She listened without interrupting, which was not like her, which told me she had already understood more than Marcus had given her. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said in Twi something that translates roughly to, "I made you carry too much." I had not expected that. I'd expected defense of Marcus, not because she didn't love me, but because she had spent our entire lives trying to hold the two of us at the same level, and admission of imbalance was not something that came easily to her. But she said it quietly and clearly, and I understood that she had known on some level for longer than I had. She had known that the story of me being the strong one had costs she had not examined, and that some of those costs had been paid in ways she had not seen until now. "I know, Mama," I said. Marcus and I did not speak for 4 months after the confrontation. He reached out in November, a text brief and unadorned that said, "I know sorry isn't enough. I just need you to know I know that." I read it several times. I did not respond immediately. I let it sit for 2 weeks, and then I sent back, "I hear you." Not forgiveness, not the door reopened, just acknowledgement that he was still a person I was willing to receive words from, which was the most I had to offer, and more than some people would have offered at all. We are not what we were. I don't think we will be again. And I have made my peace with that slowly, in the way you make peace with losses that don't announce themselves as losses at first, that present as betrayals, then slowly reveal themselves to be reckonings, and then slowly after that become, almost against your will, a kind of education. Here's what I know now that I did not know before. I know that love, real love, healthy love, does not require you to be endlessly absorbable. It does not ask you to fix everything and question nothing and hold so still that the people around you mistake your steadiness for inexhaustibility. The fact that you can carry more does not mean you should. The fact that you have not broken does not mean you are not bending. These are things I told myself were obvious, things I would have said I understood, and yet I had arranged my entire life around their opposites without knowing it. I know that trust is not a feeling, it is a practice, and like any practice, it requires evidence. The evidence was there: the co signed car, the phone call with my social security number, the dinner table question about my credit score. And I did not examine it because examining it would have required me to see something I did not want to see about someone I loved. That is human. It is also a choice, and choices have consequences. And the consequences in my case were $340,000 and a parking lot indicator and 47 minutes watching the clock. I know that rebuilding your own name, literally, financially, but also in every other sense, is not a single moment. It is Sasha tracking confirmation numbers. It is Gloria on a Tuesday afternoon. It is Brenda handing you keys on a Thursday morning. It is moving boxes in corners and a magnolia tree you didn't know you needed, and a porch that gets the light right in the morning, and you standing on it alone, which is not the same as lonely. I know that the strongest thing I ever did was not gather the evidence, though that took strength. It was not sit in that conference room without crying, though that took strength too. The strongest thing I ever did was decide that what was mine, my name, my credit, my financial life, my future, was worth protecting, even from someone I loved, especially from someone I loved. Because love that asks you to disappear into it is not love. It is consumption dressed in familiar clothes. And you are allowed to name the difference, even when it hurts, even when the person consuming you answers the phone on the second ring and uses the name your grandmother gave you like it still means what it used to mean. I applied for the mortgage a second time in February. Philip was not my loan officer. I had changed branches, wanted the clean start, but the woman who was, whose name was Teresa and who wore her hair in a neat bun and kept a photo of two dogs on her desk, pulled my credit report and looked up at me with a straightforward expression. "Everything looks good," she said. I nodded. I looked at the photo of the dogs for a moment. "It should," I said, and it did. "If you are watching this and you have been the strong one, if you have been the one who fixes things, absorbs things, carries things, and tells yourself that's just who you are, I want you to hear this. That is not a permanent assignment. You did not come into this world to be someone else's contingency plan. The people who love you correctly will not need you to disappear. And the day you decide that your name, your credit, your future, your peace is worth protecting, even from family, even from someone whose voice you've known your whole life, that is not a betrayal. That is the beginning of something better.